and welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. Coming up on this week's edition of the podcast, we're going to get into what the future looks like for LeBron James, all the changes going on in the DC entertainment universe, including Jeff Johns stepping down from his position, what the impact means for the DC movie future, along with some perspective on NFL mandatory minicamps this week, as well as some updates on the upcoming X-Men Dark Phoenix movie, and Comcast officially makes their bid. Can Disney get the rights back to the Marvel characters? We'll dive into that as well in the six-pack of topics right here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast with me, your host, Josh Hennig. Topic number one on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So it's LeBron watch, right? Everyone's got a theory where he's going to go. Everybody's got a belief. Everybody's got an interpretation of what LeBron should or shouldn't do, where he is or isn't going to go. And I was asked a very interesting and important question this week, and I want to give credit where credit is due. One of the young men who works at the radio station that I work at, 97.3 ESPN, his name is Dylan Davis. And he asked me a question. He said, where do you think LeBron is going to go versus where do you think is the best fit for LeBron? And I think that was a perfect way to set that up, because the problem is that everyone has a theory of where LeBron goes based on what they think LeBron should do, what they think makes the most sense for LeBron, instead of asking the question, what is LeBron thinking? What does LeBron view as important to him? I hearken back to Kirk Cousins a few months ago, and the conversation point that I had asked almost every day leading up to him signing with the Vikings was, what is important to Kirk Cousins? Is it the money? Is it the years? Is it the location? Is it winning? Well, we found out from the Vikings deal that it purely wasn't about money, because if it was about money, he should have signed with the Jets. The Jets were going to give him another year and about $40 million more in total money. But what did he do? He took the guaranteed money, the 3 years and the 86 from the Vikings. He also picked a winning team, the Jets, not ready to win this coming year or maybe even next year. So he picked the winning and he picked the guaranteed money. He didn't pick the years. He didn't pick the total money. He had a certain set of priorities that he zeroed in on, and now you have Kirk Cousins in a Vikings uniform for the 2018 season. So I asked the same question. What is important to LeBron? Is it money? Is it years on a contract? Is it the city? Is it his future? Is it his family? LeBron told us so, what's important to him. LeBron said at the end of the press conference after the NBA Finals, said that he's going to talk to his family. He's going to do what's best for his family. He brought up his family multiple times. So what is significant about that? Well, his wife loves Los Angeles. His wife spends a lot of time in the LA area. She loves what the LA area gives her lifestyle choice-wise. She loves the fashion scene. And that's why she spends so much of her time in LA with the kids when they're not in school. That's why they have a home in LA, so they can go out there and just stay there during the off season. Also, his kids. His one son is 13, another son is 11. So this is unlike 8 years ago, when the kids were too young to really care where daddy is playing and where they're moving to, right? You know, when a child is 3 and 5 years old, they're not as invested in where they live as when they're in their preteens. Now his kids are a couple years away from high school. Now it's not just about what daddy wants. He sits down with his son and asks him, son, what is important to you? Well, if you ask his kids, they've only ever lived in 3 cities. They've only lived in Miami, Los Angeles, and in the Cleveland area. So if his wife loves Los Angeles and his sons only know Cleveland, Miami, and LA, Do you really think when LeBron sits down with his family that his kid's going to say, you know what, Dad? Let's go to San Antonio. I've always wanted to live near the Alamo. Or they're going to turn around and say, you know what, Dad? That Madison Square Garden has so much basketball history. I would love to go live in New York. Or, you know what, Dad? That Sixers practice facility in Camden is pretty hot. I mean, that's a pretty nice facility. Let's go join the Sixers. Let's be serious. If LeBron is really considering what his family wants, he is not going to San Antonio. He's very likely not going to Houston. He's very likely not going to the Knicks or the Sixers. If his family is that involved in the decision, there's only 3 cities on the map right now. So then we have to ask the other questions. Is it about money for LeBron? LeBron doesn't need the money. If it was about the money, he'd just stay in Cleveland and max out that contract and get $40 million a year and end the story. LeBron is a multi-millionaire over and over off the court. He's being paid a ton of money from Nike. He has all this endorsement money from sponsors, for example, like the Sprite commercials that you see. He's got his own business ventures. He's got all of his business properties in Los Angeles, the center of the Hollywood universe. He doesn't need the money. So he's not sitting there worried, oh man, let me tell you, the Sixers can only offer me $24 million. I don't know. LeBron is not thinking that way about the Sixers. And the same thing with the Knicks. Oh, the Knicks can't offer me $36 million. LeBron doesn't care about that either. LeBron doesn't need the money. LeBron, if he's all about the money, he's staying in Cleveland. And I don't think he's staying in Cleveland. I feel like Cleveland only has a 2% chance of keeping LeBron. And that 2% depends on what they do with the 8th overall pick. If they trade that pick for a very good player, then yes, I think LeBron has a chance of staying. But if they go into that draft and they draft, let's say, Colin Sexton or Lonnie Walker or a player such as that, I don't think LeBron is interested in playing with those kind of guys at all. So I do think there is a tiny possibility he stays in Cleveland for one more year, but I think that's totally dependent on what happens to the 8th overall pick. To me, it comes down to this. I think that the list of teams LeBron is going to go to right now cascade like this. I think number 1 is the Lakers. I think number 2 is the Heat. I think the Sixers are 3, and the Clippers are 4, and the Cavs are 5 at this moment. And I say that for this reason. 1, I think that as of right now, I would think the Lakers are a 45% chance. And then I think that the Heat and the Sixers are tied each for 25%. And then that final 3% is the Clippers and 2% is the Cavs. And here's the reason why I have the Heat and the Sixers tied. There is a level of familiarity with the Heat for LeBron. There is a level of familiarity from his family with Miami as well. Brian Windhorst has said that there is a part of LeBron that misses the structure that he had in Miami. So maybe there's a part of LeBron that just wants to go to an area that he's familiar with. Maybe he just wants to go somewhere that he's going to be comfortable with, that he understands what's expected of him, and an organization that understands what they have to do to build around him. Now, it won't be easy for Miami, because Miami does need to get rid of the albatross that is the Hassan Whiteside contract. But what can Miami do? They can do a sign and trade deal with New Orleans. Whiteside goes to New Orleans, Boogie Cousins goes to Miami. And then what does Miami do? Then they go out in free agency. They bring in a couple guys. Maybe they go out and they outbid Boston for Marcus Smart. Or they go out and they pluck a guy like Trevor Ariza off the free agent market. Maybe they steal Julius Randle from LA. there's a couple different ways they can go with this to rebuild that team around LeBron. Of course, you have your shooters. You have your free agents like J.J. Redick and Marco Bellinelli and Avery Bradley. You do have the options out there, so you can build around LeBron on the fly if you're Miami. The Sixers are at 25% as well, and it's not just because the Sixers have cap space. Everyone brings up Ben Simmons. To me, the Ben Simmons issue is actually not as big as something else for LeBron. Joel Embiid's a bigger deal than Ben Simmons. Because what is Joel Embiid? Joel Embiid's a bona fide superstar. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are two of the top 20 players in the NBA today. You're going to a team that all they need to do is add more shooters and you're good to go. And whether you acquire those shooters in free agency, whether you acquire those shooters in a trade, they'll find a way to get the shooters. And that Robert Covington contract is actually pretty appealing to trade. It's not like that's going to be an albatross. No, he gets paid less each year of that contract moving forward. So for a team looking for a 3-and-D player not to spend a ton of money long term, Covington is an attractive option. And maybe for a team like the Phoenix Suns that look at Jared Dudley's contract, for example, they say, we don't really want to be paying Jared Dudley all this money. We'll take Covington off your hands and we'll give you Dudley. Well, that will save the Sixers a little bit of money. And also the Suns get an inexpensive option for the small forward position to go along with Josh Jackson and TJ Warren. And what does Dudley do? Dudley shoots threes. Another guy to have next to LeBron. So there's a couple ways the Sixers can still improve their team with the shooters and with LeBron. And you can't deny the fact that if LeBron's going to stay in the Eastern Conference, he's going to want to go to a team that makes sense for him and his family. There's the family thing again. Who is LeBron James good friends with when he was in Cleveland? DeJuan Wagner. Where is DeJuan Wagner and his family living now? In the New Jersey, Philadelphia, Camden area. So, guess what? If LeBron wants to be near DeJuan Wagner, and maybe LeBron's kids are friends with DeJuan Wagner's kids, that's where the connection for the Sixers is. It's not Ben Simmons. It's DeJuan Wagner and his family, and it's Joel Embiid, and it's the fact that the Sixers have the flexibility to be able to upgrade around those three stars. I throw in the Clippers because of Jerry West. Jerry West is the man who has spoken to LeBron when he lost to the Mavs and when he lost to the Spurs and the first time he lost to the Warriors, when LeBron was very frustrated, when he was very down, when he was very just really eating at himself. Jerry West was the man who spoke to LeBron and helped him get through all of that. Why? Because Jerry West was 1-8 in the NBA Finals. He was one of the best players in the NBA in the 60s and early 70s. And he didn't win a championship until he had 3 other Hall of Famers with him on the Lakers. When it was Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, and Gail Goodrich, they finally won a championship. But before that, Jerry couldn't get past the Sixers. He couldn't beat the Celtics. He couldn't win a championship. He couldn't get over the hump. So if anybody understands what it's like to deal with that type of just putting all of your everything into every series and losing, it was Jerry West. And what does Jerry West have that the Lakers don't have, that the Sixers don't have, the Cavs don't have? Jerry West is a championship winning executive. He built Lakers championship teams. He resurrected the Memphis Grizzlies franchise and made them a playoff contender. He helped build the Warriors franchise. Remember, he was the advisor for Bob Myers with the Warriors, helped them go through drafts, helped them make the right acquisitions. Warriors are a dynasty now. The Lakers were a dynasty with Shaq and Kobe. Jerry West was also in the front office during the Showtime Lakers. So you're talking about a man who is involved with championship basketball teams from 3 different decades. So if you're LeBron and your wife wants to go to LA, who do you really trust to build a championship team? Do you trust Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka? Or do you trust Jerry West? I think it's a pretty obvious choice. Now, the reason why the Lakers are 45% in my mind is very, very simple. It's very, very simple. They're the Lakers. If LeBron really appreciates the purple and gold that much and has that much respect for the Lakers organization and Jeannie Buss and all that stuff, it's the Lakers. Okay? I throw the Clippers in there just because of Jerry West. Jerry West has a shot of making it happen. And that's what it comes down to, because if LeBron is serious about his family, I don't care what Kenyon Martin says about LeBron going to the Knicks. David Griffin thinks the Sixers have an advantage over the other teams. There's 4 Hollywood insiders say LeBron is going to the Lakers. I don't care what all of you say. LeBron, we take him at his word, says it's about his family. And if it's about his family, then LeBron is going to sit down with his kids and his wife and ask them what they want. And that is what's going to influence LeBron. And that's why, to me, LA is the front runner. Cleveland and Miami are in the conversation. And we'll see if there actually is a relationship between LeBron's kids and DeJuan Wagner's kids, and if that is an option as well. But moving forward, I can almost guarantee you that whatever decision LeBron makes is going to have something to do with where his kids, his sons, go to school moving forward. Topic number 2 in this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. There's a lot of craziness going on at DC Entertainment and Warner Brothers Studios, because with the shortcomings, not really failings, but shortcomings of Justice League and Batman v Superman, and just the messy production schedules for movies such as Shazam and The Flash, and all these crazy on-again, off-again rumors about what is going on with Ben Affleck in the Batman movie, it has been announced that Jeff Johns, who has been the top creative executive for DC Entertainment and the Warner Brothers Studios, is stepping down as part of the massive shakeup going on with the entertainment movie side of DC Comics. To make a long story short, there's been a bunch of changes. Diane Nelson has stepped down. Jeff Johns has stepped down now. And we know that the new man in charge moving forward, and even though he stepped in January, he's also taking Jeff Johns' role now, is Walter Hamada. And from what we understand, Hamada is personally going through each project and either deciding to shut it down or keep it moving forward. And one of the major moves they're making is they're getting rid of what they're referring to as the somber, murky, darker tones in the DC movie universe. And they're going to save those tones for a separate alternate universe they're going to call by a different name. So what's going to happen is you're going to have the DCEU still, which is your main continuity of movies, kind of like Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then you're going to have your alternate universe. They'll probably call it something like DC Dark or something like that. That's where Todd Phillips' Joker movie is going to kind of fill in that void. Todd Phillips / Joaquin Phoenix playing the Joker film is going to be set in a totally different universe, totally different interpretation of the Joker and Gotham and all of that. So that also leaves the opportunity for the reports of Jared Leto's Joker continuing in the DCEU, getting his own spin-off movie as well. So DC is trying to keep everything moving forward, and especially with all the rumors that Ben Affleck wants nothing to do with the Batman movie moving forward. I think the combination of all of this has really put DC into a point where they realize that they just cannot keep throwing money at the problem. They have to have better people running the ship. And let's be realistic. Zack Snyder's movies tried too hard. They tried too hard to go head to head with what Marvel is doing. They tried to accelerate Marvel had Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, The Incredible Hulk. All of these movies before they ever got to Avengers. You know what DC did? They jumped headlong into Justice League. They had Man of Steel, they had Batman v Superman, they had Wonder Woman, and bam, you got Justice League. And that Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League was a very small timetable. That did not get spread out over time. They didn't build up. They didn't give the audience great stories. Jeff Johns, people thought was going to be the right guy for the job. But I think Johns, who is a guy who has a background as a comic book writer, I don't know if he was always the best person for the movies, because there's a difference between putting out movies and writing for comics. You know, there are two different presentations. You know, one thing with the comics, you can draw out a story over multiple pages and multiple issues and multiple story arcs and branch it out. A movie is something that has to be condensed within a certain amount of time. And so the storytelling is a little different than it was, for example, like a television show or a comic book. And you notice DC has been very successful with the TV shows in the CW. Arrow, Black Lightning, The Flash. These are all shows that have had a lot of success. But the storytelling on a television show, again, is different than a movie. So while the television shows can more reflect the style of comics that we have come to know. Now, we know that Johns was a co-writer on the upcoming Aquaman movie that comes out December 21st. But his work on these projects, he is not the exclusive man on the project. He's not the main director. He's not the main executive. He's not the main guy pushing the story. He's just part of the entire group on the project. So Jeff Johns came out and said, I want to spend my days writing. He doesn't want to be an executive anymore. So that tells you that you're going to get away from the guys who shouldn't be running this to the people who can possibly do a better job. And I think Hamada is going to do a good job, because he's already saying, I'm going to look at the Flash. I'm not going to make him, doom and gloom. I'm not going to make him dark. I'm not going to make him... We're not going to try to make Christopher Nolan movies anymore, okay? Christopher Nolan was very successful with what he was doing, because he wrote it, he directed it, it was his baby. You cannot mimic what somebody else did and try to have the same success. Now, with the Batman movie, they're trying to cast somebody else for the Batman role. There's been a lot of rumors about it, but I think if they stick with the original concept for the Flash, which is time travel and the Flashpoint storyline, they can reset the DC universe, introduce a new Batman, and then move forward with the entire universe, this continuity with the right people in place. And furthermore, I think that the Birds of Prey movie is going to help them a lot, because if they can at least capitalize on Margot Robbie's popularity with the Harley Quinn character, and then get a good storyline with that movie, it can be successful. And we know Wonder Woman, they're in production. It looks like it's going to be called Wonder Woman 1984, which I find fascinating. I find that a little interesting. So when you really break it down, the Wonder Woman movie was successful because it was written well. It was directed by someone who understands movies. It was written by somebody who understands movies. The problem with Justice League and Batman v Superman, all these things, they try to take a bunch of ideas and smash them into a movie that just never had continuity to it. So hopefully the new executives at DC Entertainment and Warner Brothers can get this show on the road and do it right, because they are so far behind Marvel at this point. I don't know if they'll ever catch up. They can't focus on competing with Marvel. They have to focus on doing their best with their own characters. Topic number 3 on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. It's been an interesting week in the NFL. A lot of the mandatory minicamps got underway, and we saw some holdouts. Aaron Donald, Julio Jones, Earl Thomas, Le'Veon Bell, and others all holding out to get new contracts, and all for different reasons as well. But one man was at OTAs. There was a man who is demanding a new contract, who is there at mandatory minicamp. And that's the New York Giants star wide receiver, Odell Beckham Jr. You may notice a little bit of excitement in my voice. There's a reason why. Odell is growing up right in front of our eyes. You see, Odell is supposed to be the diva receiver, right? He's supposed to be the guy who's all about the spotlight and the money, and he's a little overly eccentric, and he's a little dancing a little too much. He's going a little too far, right? What did Odell Beckham Jr. do? He's been with his quarterback. He's been with his coaches. He's learning the offense, the new offense, like he should be. You see, we spend so much time getting on Odell Beckham Jr.'s case. I'm one of those guys. I hated the immaturity from the last couple of years. I've hated his attitude. I've hated how he's been allowed to get away with basically whatever he wanted, to say he knew whatever he wanted. No one held him accountable. I hated it. I hate when guys are so immature and can't get out of their own way. But what did he do? We can do both. I can help us win football games, and we can work on a contract as well. And he's coming off an injury as well. So for the Giants, they want to see how healthy he is. They want to see how invested he is in the team and the organization. And him being there is a great sign. On the contrast, Julio Jones not being at Atlanta Falcons camp, that just straight up me, because you got 3 years and $46 million left on your contract, and you're holding out because you're not being paid as the number one receiver in the NFL. You're being paid as the fifth best receiver in the NFL. Let's get something straight. The Falcons have a losing record over the last 3 seasons when Julio Jones has 6 or more catches in a game. So Julio Jones' best games, the Falcons lose. When he has under 6 catches and he has less productive games, the Falcons have won those games. Why? Because the Falcons have a running back tandem in Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman who can help propel this offense. And many times Julio Jones becomes a decoy for other guys on the offense to get touchdowns, like Mohamed Sanu. So for Julio to be sitting there and demanding a pay raise and a new contract, you signed a contract. You got 3 years left on your deal. You're being paid handsomely. And by the way, I could argue you might be overpaid because you're basically a decoy half the time. You're basically a guy who draws the defense away from the other receivers and allows them to be productive. And by the way, as I mentioned, your team loses when you have massive games. So you know what? You should be in camp. A shame on you. Le'Veon Bell is a different situation. Le'Veon Bell is not contractually obligated to be at camp because he hasn't signed a contract. He has not signed his franchise tag tender. So he doesn't have to be in camp. He doesn't have to show up. Now, I agree with Antonio Brown, his teammate with the Steelers. Brown, who I think is the number one receiver in the NFL, is a guy who has said, look, you should be here just to show some good faith, just to show that you want to be part of the organization. Now, obviously, contractually, you can't work out with the team, but you can still be around the organization and around the guys just to show that you're invested in the organization. So I do think it might help if Bell was there with the negotiation, but I do think also that he's demanding too much money. So that's probably one of the reasons why he's not there, because he is asking for top running back and top receiver money. His argument is that he's the second best receiver on the team, he's the number one running back on the team, and he should be paid accordingly. That theory is dumb, because until Le'Veon Bell becomes Marshall Faulk and LaDainian Tomlinson, he's not getting that kind of money from me if I'm a general manager. Aaron Donald is way underpaid. The guy's basically made less than $2 million over the last 2 years, while guys who are not as talented as he is are making double, triple, and quadruple what Aaron Donald is. So I totally understand him holding out for a new contract. Obviously, both sides for the last year and a half have been in a massive impasse when it comes to signing him to a new deal. You have to wonder, is this a Donald issue or is this a Rams issue? Which side in negotiations has stuck their foot in the ground, planted their flag, and said, we're not moving from this spot? If it's Donald's camp, then you know what? He needs to have a better agent because it shouldn't take you a year and a half to get a deal done. But if it's the Rams, I can't blame Donald for saying I don't want to be there because he's underpaid, he's underappreciated, and at the end of the day, that defense is not as impactful without him. He was a monster last year. And in that playoff game, the Falcons were lucky that Donald didn't totally take over that game because he bull rushed that line so many times, the Falcons, just shredding the interior of that line. It's amazing Matt Ryan didn't get hurt in that playoff game. So you got to pay the man. You got to take care of him. Each one of these situations is different. I've never been a fan of guys holding out when they have contracts. I think Julio Jones is being a brat for holding out. I understand why Aaron Donald is holding out. And as for Le'Veon Bell, I think he's being irrational. But kudos to Odell Beckham Jr. for showing maturity, showing the desire to be there for his teammates, putting his best foot forward for himself, for that organization. And I think that's going to pay massive dividends this year when he has a great season this year for the Giants, and it forces that football team to pay him the money that he wants. Topic number 4 on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So there's some speculation that's been going on about the upcoming X-Men Dark Phoenix movie. We know that some footage and some was revealed at Cine Europe this week, and according to reviews by people who saw it, looked a lot better than the initial views of X-Men Apocalypse. So that is a promising thing. This movie is going to be set in the 1990s, so it's another 10 years in the future. And as Evan Peters said about his character Quicksilver, he is a guy who is more mature now. Everyone in the movie is a little more mature. It's going to be more of a drama, a little bit darker than the last couple movies. And that kind of goes along with the theme of the movie, and that is, it is the Dark Phoenix story arc. And I think that with the movie being delayed because of reshoots, I think a lot of people went into it thinking, oh no. Oh man, they're going to mess it up. Oh man, it's going to be stupid. And I don't think that necessarily means it's always going to be bad. I know people have a huge sour taste in their mouth because of the reshoots for Justice League apparently made that movie much worse than it turned out to be. Much worse than it should have been for certain characters and certain angles and certain parts of the story. Well, I think that them reshooting the X-Men Dark Phoenix also allows Fox to try to, shall I call it, get it right the first time, right? The idea that they want X-Men Dark Phoenix, if this is their last X-Men movie, for it to truly be their best foot forward, because whatever happens with the Disney Comcast acquisition, we don't know what that means for the X-Men movies. We don't know what that means for all the writing that has been done for the Gambit movie and for the New Mutants movie and for all these different things that the Fox Studios people are working on. So I never really read into this whole idea that, it automatically more reshoots means it's bad. No, I think what it means is that they're trying to make sure they get it right. And I think that is a very positive thing. Also, there's a very interesting side note with all this. So, according to reports, Jessica Chastain's character in the X-Men Dark Phoenix is being described as a villain. And I think that gets away from some of the original theories about this movie, which was that we might see Mr. Sinister as one of the villains. But now it looks like the villain may be someone who is invading Earth. Whether that is someone like a Super Skrull. I don't think it would be a Skrull, just because I don't know how many rights that Fox actually has when it comes to the Skrulls. I know that they have the rights to Super Skrull specifically because of the Fantastic Four, but I don't know if it can be the Skrulls, just because I know that MCU has most of the rights to the Skrull characters. There's also the possibility that we may see the Shi'ar Empire involved in this movie. For those who don't know, the Shi'ar Empire is a major part of the X-Men continuity in comics because of the fact that in the comics, the Shi'ar Empire, which is another one of these alien empires that's at war with the Kree and the Skrull and all these people, but one of their big deals is they deal with Dark Phoenix, and the Shi'ar royalty goes after the Dark Phoenix because they blame who they call the Death Bird for the murder of some of their people. So, maybe there might be something where the Shi'ar finds Dark Phoenix the force on Earth, comes to Earth, apprehend Jean Grey, trying to blame her for what a previous bearer of the Dark Phoenix force did to their people, and that may cause an entire issue and set of problems altogether. So I tend to think that the Shi'ar Empire is the most likely explanation. Again, the Skrulls is the dicey issue because of the fact that I don't think that Fox has the rights to the Skrulls. I know they have the right to Super Skrull, a specific character, but the Skrulls in general, I don't know how the legalities will work out with that. So, but with all the reports, it looks like X-Men Dark Phoenix, which is supposed to come out early 2019, is on a good trajectory. That's a positive because I like the casting they've done for these movies. I think Sophia Turner has been a very good Jean Grey. I like the fact that they're bringing a younger approach to the X-Men characters instead of going with just everybody all aged and grown up. I think it's a more fun, a more interesting twist, and I really hope that at some point Quicksilver can tell Magneto that he's his son. Because can we just get that awkwardness out of the way already? It was getting a little silly in the last X-Men movie. Topic number 5 on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. Reports coming out that Michael Porter Jr., he had back spasms this week. And as one of the top prospects for the NBA draft, he was coming off of and missing almost the entire college basketball season. When you get back spasms and you can't get out of bed, it seems like a problem. Well, further reports are coming out that they are going to allow NBA teams and their doctors to evaluate Michael Porter Jr.'s surgically repaired back on Friday. Now, we'll see if this actually happens or not and what the results are. A lot of the people around Michael Porter Jr. are saying this is an isolated incident, but it looks like teams are not going to be able to work him out, but at least be able to medically clear him. And I mentioned this on the radio this week. This is very concerning because I am someone who has dealt with back issues, but I am not a 6'7", 6'8" special athlete. So I don't have the same medical care as Michael Porter Jr. And if you missed almost an entire basketball season due to a back problem, and all of a sudden you're having back spasms the couple days before your major workout for NBA teams who are going to want to draft you, that concerns me. My 2 major back problems both kept me out of action for about 2 months. And I didn't have back surgery for either one. And I don't want to get into all the details of what I dealt with because it's not relevant to the subject. But I had the one back issue when I was 16, and I had the other back issue when I was 30. So I don't have the same medical care that Michael Porter Jr. has available to him. And I didn't have back surgery, but I was pretty much good to go 2 months later. If he's already having back problems and back spasms months and months and months after he had surgery, after he's been working out, and he's dealing with all these issues, there's a part of me that wonders, if I'm an NBA team, I better be 100% positive that this is not going to be a reoccurring problem his entire career. Look, Michael Porter Jr. has a great ceiling as a basketball player. Michael Porter Jr. has the potential to be a bigger version of Brandon Roy. For those who don't remember, Brandon Roy was a very, very good athlete. He could shoot from the outside. He could attack the basket. But the problem with Brandon Roy was he couldn't stay healthy. And I think the same health issues is something that's hanging over Michael Porter Jr. now. And it's a shame because when you have someone that talented, injury issues are sometimes out of your control, right? You can't always control how your body's going to react to different situations and different circumstances, how the body's going to break down, how the body is it going to bounce back, is it not going to bounce back? So when you look at Michael Porter Jr., if you're an NBA team, you got to do your homework. You got to go through all the medical records. You got to go through all your doctor's tests. And if you're not 100% satisfied that this young man, these back spasms, these hip issues are an isolated incident, have nothing to do with the back surgery, and that he's 100% good to go, if I'm not fully convinced, I can't draft him, because I cannot burn a high draft pick on a guy who can't stay healthy. Look, if you're an NBA team, you may look at this draft and say, look, I'm not convinced that Michael Porter Jr. can stay healthy. And we may have seen that domino effect from NBA teams already. The reports came out on Thursday that the Memphis Grizzlies are attempting to shop the 4th overall pick and Chandler Parsons. Now, part of that is they're trying to get rid of Chandler Parsons' contract. It is an albatross on their books. He has not been a good signing for them at all. It has not worked out. But it's also a sign that they're not convinced that they want to stay at the 4th overall pick. They are not sold on this draft class. And Michael Porter Jr.'s injury may have something to do with that, because that may be a sign that NBA teams are already bailing. To me, it's not a bad draft class at all. But I do think that there's a lot of teams that look at the fact that this is a heavy draft class on big men. The Wendell Carters, the Andre Aytons, the Jaren Jacksons. There's not as many guards and wings as there was last year. And the majority of the wing players, the guys who play the guard and the forwards, the guys like the Mikal Bridges, the Miles Bridges, the Lonnie Walkers, the Zaire Smiths, the Kevin Knoxes, they're not guys who are considered the top prospects in this draft. They're being projected lower than the top 5. So if you're a team and you look at the top picks and you say, I'm not sold on Michael Porter Jr. or Wendell Carter or Jaren Jackson, I understand a team like Memphis saying, you know what, I want to get out of this 4th pick. I'm willing to give up on this opportunity, move down the draft, or get out of the top 10 altogether. And you know what? The back is a serious deal when you are an athlete. If your back is not right, it just limits everything you do the rest of your life. I know for me, again, I don't have the same medical care that Michael Porter Jr. does. But you know what? There are some days that my back's good, some days my back is bad. It's not because I'm still hurting all the time or I'm still injured. It's just because the way the body is affected when you do injure it. It's the concern for Michael Porter Jr. You're a guy who's jumping, you're dunking, you're shooting, you're playing defense. You might get knocked to the floor in a collision or coming off of a pick, driving to the basket for a hard foul. And you land on your back wrong and you're having back spasms already. That is concerning. So I never like to hear when these kind of athletes have these problems reoccurring, because it makes you wonder, will they ever be 100% the guy that we hoped and expected him to be? If Michael Porter Jr. keeps having these back problems, that takes him from being potentially this great perennial all-star player to just being a good to very good player for 10 to 12 years. And that would be disappointing, because someone with his talent should be able to have the opportunity to maximize that talent. Topic number 6 in this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. Comcast has finally come through with their bid on Fox Studios. We mentioned this earlier. Because the future of Fox Studios is still in the air, Comcast has come forward with an all-cash offer of $65 billion to acquire the majority of 21st Century Fox's assets that include Fox's film and television assets, including international holdings, and its stake in Hulu streaming service. Now, I've been telling you since the beginning of this podcast, this is a big deal because Comcast's goals are very different than Disney's goals in the acquisition of 21st Century Fox's assets. And so, for Comcast, this is as much about getting an advancement for their business as anything else. And Comcast, this big cash offer is an attempt to stop the accelerated deal that is the Fox-Disney agreement. Now, anytime you're offering a 19% increase on an offer of what Disney is going to stop Fox and just signing everything over to Disney. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what Disney's counter offer is, because Disney's counter offer is probably going to be substantial, because most of Disney's offer right now initially was not all cash like the Comcast offer. So if Disney offers more cash for Comcast on top of all the other aspects of the bid, then it's going to allow Fox to say, well, what is the best offer for us? One of the things that has to be considered in all of this as well is the fact that Comcast and Disney are going after very different things when it comes to this deal. And as I mentioned on this podcast about a month ago, I always thought there might be a possibility that these two sides may just come to some sort of agreement to split the assets. And this was recommended by Barton Crockett, who is an analyst for capital market company B. Riley FBR. He said on CNBC on Thursday that he expects Disney to match the Comcast offer, if not exceed it. And basically the deal that appeases Rupert Murdoch, who is the owner of these 21st Century Fox assets, his tax concerns in terms of selling off this deal. Because at the end of the day, Comcast is chasing after specific pieces of 20th Century Fox. They're not interested in the whole shebang. As I mentioned in previous podcasts, Comcast is interested in specific things. One, they want total control over the Sky network broadcasting. That way they have a more of an international reach. They have their hands in the international television market. They control that aspect, and they no longer have to fight with anybody for those assets. Also with Comcast, they want those television networks. They want the regional sports networks. They want the Fox Wisconsin, Fox Sports Ohio, Fox Sports Northwest. They want all those properties because it helps them expand the NBC Sports Network reach. Also, when you absorb FS1, you absorb FX movies, what you're doing is you're no longer having to pay the exorbitant fees to the Fox company for those networks, and now you can actually offer a lower price for your television services, and that way it puts you in a position, if you are Comcast/Xfinity, to go to customers and say, hey, we're going to drop all your rates. You have no reason to leave and go to DirecTV. You don't have to cut the cord and go to Roku or PlayStation View or YouTube TV or any of these other platforms. We're going to consolidate everything in here. It's cheaper, and then we're doing it just for you. That way, Xfinity, Comcast keeps business. They have their hands in all these television networks. And also, they want some of the 20th Century Fox studios because it gives NBC Universal more properties to work with when it comes to movies. This is where Disney comes in. Disney's main purpose of acquiring the Fox 21st Century Fox Film Studios is to get the Marvel assets back. Give the MCU back their characters like Fantastic Four and X-Men. Also for Disney, they want certain of the other characters as well. You know, a character like Indiana Jones is a very appealing thing to add to the dossier along with Star Wars and Marvel under the Disney banner. Also for Disney, they look at some of the other television networks as something that they don't really know if they want all of that. They don't want all of these television networks like National Geographic and FX. They're not really as interested in that. Now, Disney may be very interested in acquiring Hulu because Hulu right now is the independent. Hulu is basically positioned themselves as the perfect rival to Netflix, and Disney's already talked about releasing their own streaming platform next year. So between the ESPN Plus platform, which is already released this year under the Disney banner, and Disney's exclusive app they want to release next year, there may be a possibility that they want to take on Hulu and its 20 million subscribers and use that as a way to challenge the Comcast Netflix partnership as a way of saying, look, we're going to stick all of our stuff exclusively on Hulu. We're not going to work with Netflix as much anymore, and we're going to use this as our shall I say, outlet. So maybe if you're a Hulu customer and you're not paying for Hulu's commercial-free platform right now, maybe you're going to say, look, if you pay for the commercial-free, you also get all the Disney streaming options as well. That may be part of a conversation point for Disney to acquire Hulu. We know that Comcast wants Hulu too, and if there is going to be a serious split, this is how I think it would go down. And obviously everything is still conjecture right now because Disney is still in the process of building its counteroffer. And whatever the counteroffer is, if it's sweet enough, Fox may say, go away, Comcast. We don't want to sell it to you anymore anyway. But if there's a possibility that Disney can acquire a part and Comcast can acquire a part, I think it goes down a little bit like this. I think Comcast can walk away with all the television networks, your Fox Sports regional networks, your FX, your FS1, your National Geographic. Disney walks away with all the Marvel television rights. So they get back the X-Men, they get back the Fantastic Four. Maybe they let Indiana Jones slide and they give that over the Comcast NBC Universal Studios as well. And then you go and give Disney Hulu. That way Disney has Hulu, Comcast has Netflix, and everybody kind of walks away with what they're happy with. And of course, Disney has no real interest in Sky Networks anyway. They'll let Comcast have that piece because for Disney long term, Disney's not in the market to add Sky or Sky Sports. They're in the market to specifically keep making money off of movies. Remember, for Disney, their profitability and their market share has increased exponentially with the growth of the MCU and the Marvel movies. So for them, it's much more important to keep the money train rolling for the movies and keep the Marvel Cinematic Universe healthy and strong and productive than it is for them to have a bunch of television networks when they already, with ESPN, have cut hundreds of millions of dollars in staff and budget and basically started the process of actually getting away from the expansion of television networks. That's why the ESPN Plus is becoming more and more of a push for them, because eventually they are going to shut down the likes of ESPNU. They're going to get away from the ESPN news platforms, and they're going to use the ESPN Plus more and more for programming. That way it saves them on budget, they're more digital, and it keeps them ahead of the curve in terms of competing with the likes of CBS Sports and Fox Sports and NBC Sports as well. And for NBC Sports, because of their relationship with Comcast, because of the NBC Universal, Comcast, Xfinity conglomerate, they're more interested in having networks than Disney is. So there is a way that everybody walks out of this happy. But as of right now, Comcast has stepped forward with a massive financial offer of $65 billion. And I think at the end of the day, Disney's counteroffer is going to be very appeasing to Fox, and the decision is going to have to be made between the three companies. Do we work together so everybody walks away with what they want, or is one of these companies going to overbid for the 21st century Fox assets? Thanks again for listening to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, hit that subscribe button to catch the podcast each and every week. Hit that like button as well if you enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts on any topics this week, drop your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to catch us for each edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast right here on this YouTube channel with me, your host, Josh Hennig.